Hello, I'm Sue and I'm Andy's mum, and Andy has asked me to do a thought for the day. My thought for the day comes from the book of Zephaniah, which is towards the back of the Old Testament, and it contains within it one of my favourite verses of all times, and one that I have used on several occasions, and I will tell you about one of those occasions after I've read it. It's actually Zephaniah 3 verse 17, and it says this: "The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing." A few years back now, I went to Malawi, and I went on a church trip to a mission field that one of our elders in my church at the time had been a doctor at for several years. So he took a group of about 20 of us from church. That was made up of teenagers up to, I think probably the oldest in our group was then in their 70s. And it didn't come long after our daughter had died. And so I was still feeling quite tender. On one of those trips, we went to meet a group of widows. Now, these widows had lost their husbands, and not only had they lost their husbands, but as the AIDS epidemic had spread over the African continent, they had also lost their own children to AIDS. And they found themselves seeking sanctuary at this mission station with their grandchildren. So these grandmothers were solely responsible for their grandchildren. And in Malawi, there is no state support system, so they were on their own. And we went to visit them, and I found it quite moving, to say the least. And as I was trying to compose myself and not be a total wimp in the presence of these women who had massive burdens on their shoulders, the pastor said, "And now Sister Sue will bring us a word." And I was busy thinking in my head, who's Sister Sue? And then I realised it was me. And I stood for what seemed like hours in front of these women, thinking, what on earth can I give to them that is going to help them in this situation? I was working with a translator, so I had a little bit of time. Being with a translator gives you that time. So I opened my Bible to this verse. "The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save." How those women must have felt isolated and alone. "He will take great delight in you." These women were on their own. They didn't have anyone to delight in them, really. "He will quiet you with his love." That was probably the funniest bit of it, really, because their lives weren't very quiet. But in those moments of quietness, I encouraged them to look for God's love. And then most of all, I majored on this verse: "He will rejoice over you with singing." And when I said that, all of them, there were about 20 of them, just cried and broke down. And at that point, I cried and broke down, and I was still crying and breaking down, going down the hill on our way back to the house that we were staying in. It moved me beyond anything I'd ever seen before, that these women, so humble, so poor, so dependent on other people to look after them, hadn't really been told before how loved they were by God, or if they hadn't been told, it hadn't reached deep down into their hearts. I wonder for you listening today whether that verse has any resonance with you. We have been through probably one of the most difficult periods of our modern time, where we have been isolated and alone, separate from our families. We've had to face things that have been difficult to face on our own. Know this today as you listen to this thought. God rejoices over you with singing. When he looks at you, he sings. You may not do that when you look at yourself, but he does. My prayer for you at Manvers Street is the same as my prayer for Warminster Baptist Church, that you will know God's great and amazing love for each one of you. So be blessed. Keep close to God. And I will speak to you at some other point.